So, this is our first session, real proper session of this retreat, in which we're looking at these four areas of, first of all, awake, and then um, stable, and then secure, and then destined to make it. So, all of that implies that you are mostly asleep, quite unstable, rather insecure, and thinking that you might not make it. And so this is very important to take up, I think, because what I was thinking is that um, definitely the the awareness people have at the moment is this climate change drama. And what does climate change mean if you are a BK? Because it means something very different if you're not a BK. If you're not a BK, you have two possibilities. Either you think there is climate change or you think that it's a hoax. And what we have learned in our studies is that we're in a period of very rapid, irreversible change. And so anything you might want to do to delay or stop or reverse the change is a waste of time and energy, because it is irreversible and it is accelerating. And so that's like a given. And then the next thing to do is to think about, okay, that being the case, what is required? Because if you're a climate change person, you think that the most important thing is to plant a tree and handle the carbon footprint and do things that will be nice for the earth so that it stays okay the way it is. But the earth is saying, I need a change. I don't like it the way it is. And so this happens time to time. Very, very big, enormous change. And there's one, at least one, but a number of people who take a look at the very, very big picture on the earth, what happens. And what they say is that every so often there is absolute massive change, which happens very, very quickly, followed by very, very slow change. And this is normally roughly every 3,000 years. And if you look at timelines in different scriptures, you will find that they correspond extremely closely to what Baba tells us about in terms of the 5,000-year cycle. Like, I think the time cycle, the timeline of the Bible is 6,000 years, which is not that much different from 5,000 years in comparison with 28 billion years, which is the scientific idea of how much time there is between big bangs. Because nobody says there's only one big bang. And then if you look at the just the nature of things. It is like that. There's very, very, the only way to have a real, solid, lasting, good change is to have a very, very big war. Most of the benefits that we're experiencing at this time in terms of the state of the world is direct consequence of the Second World War, which was a direct consequence of the First World War, which happened as a result of previous wars. So wars are moments that indicate positive change. But not very many people look at it that way, because when you see war, you see bad because many people die and many buildings get bombed and a lot of people have sorrow and trouble and poison and wounds. And so, all of this is called bad. But then there are many, many things that could not have happened if that war had not taken place. And so things can be looked at equally validly as bad things or good things. But when you have something very, very global in impact, then there's definitely a big effect, and which is carrying everyone forward. And at the same time, it flags up man's inhumanity to man, because there's things that happen in war very easily that don't happen when there's not a war. But when you need to make a big shift in society, the best thing to do is have a war. Don't tell anybody. But anyway, from the angle of the spiritual knowledge that we study, he says to us, I'm here. God says, I'm here. And so, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because, when God comes and talks to us and fulfills our prayer for purification and take away the sorrow, give us happiness, and we want the truth and all of those things. So in that sense, it would be a good thing. But when God comes, all the status quo gets unstatus quoed. So all turn upside down and absolutely altered. And so our relationship with change is really what's going on. And so some people are relatively comfortable with change, but most people like things to be predictable. They like continuity, and they don't want disruption and disturbance. But what is happening to everybody is disruption and disturbance. Yes? We have a lot of disruption and disturbance in family relationships, professional relationships, friendship relationships. All that is in disturbance. And we don't really think that this is the time which is specially designed for lots of disturbance in relationships. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we have to decide, because it's up to our perspective if we think it's good or it's not good. But if you don't have a very big disruption in relationships, you will never become free, independent, and assertive, will you? Right? Yes or no? I think so, yeah. And then we also have a lot of problem with the body, right? he gets old, number one. This is also unfortunate. It's one of those things. You can't actually reverse time. We try very hard, but there is a natural thing called deterioration. That's the way it goes. And then we also have a very, very large human population, which means that the strain on the resources is very big. And so there are some people who say the problem is population. Let's do some ethnic cleansing. And then everybody else says, no, 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 you can't do that. So, and then BK say, well, let's all be celibate. Oh, no, 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 we can't have that. That's a very good way to reduce the population, you know. And then the people who leave their bodies say, no, 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 you can't do that because we don't have anywhere to go. So that's another problem. So there are just circumstances that don't usually get defined quite like this, but we are at a time when this sort of J curve of everything is hitting the ceiling, isn't it? The consumption of oil, the requirement of energy, the lack of water, all the things has reached this situation. And so what does it mean to be awake around that? Because when Shiv Baba starts talking to us, he tells us, look, this is the end of one cycle and the beginning of another cycle, which means the world, every aspect of the world will be turned upside down rapidly, irreversibly, and quite catastrophically. Is that okay? And of course, everybody says, well, no, that is not okay. And he says, well, anyway, it's going to happen. So you have to learn how to manage in that situation, because then it'll be easier for you. Because, there's nothing he can do, and there's nothing we can do, and there's nothing in any way possible to change this situation. But what is important is to understand what the circumstance means to us. Because one thing that's really very interesting, which we do need to be very awake about, is that this is the one and only time when there is evolution. But all the rest of the time, there is devolution, deterioration. And regardless of Einstein, what's his name, the evolution guy? Darwin. Regardless of Darwin, there has not been any indication whatsoever of anything evolving from anything. There's nothing to support that idea, except one thing. That unless you get all the population to believe in evolution, you cannot set up a system of democracy. These two things are absolutely interdependent. Because democracy means that the next guy that you elect will be, by definition, better than the previous guy. Right? Because otherwise the voters will not vote if it's definitely going to be worse. Would they vote? They wouldn't vote. Of course not. So this is why we have the system of evolution, is because we have the system of democracy. And democracy has lots of good things and some things that don't work very well. But that's not the subject. The point is that we have this really short period of the cycle, which we call the confluence age, where we need to be awake. Because if we are awake, then we can take advantage of the period of evolution and we can evolve. And if we are not awake, then we will not evolve. And this is because the confluence age is superimposed on the iron age. And so, from the angle of being awake or asleep, if we are soul conscious, that's called awake. And when you slip into body consciousness, that's called asleep. And it's also, or there's also this expression that if you're awake and then you go back to sleep again, that's called dead. You're dead. Now, that sounds a bit extreme, but that expression comes up. If you leave the process of evolution, then effectively you're dead because you go down. And so we're in this very tricky situation where it's rather a lot of work to remain awake and very normal to fall asleep. And it requires us to be very creative and very subtle to handle two opposing, we can always call them time zones, because the time zone of the Iron Age is going down and the time zone of the Confluence Age is going up, which means that we are basically in a sort of a roller coaster. Do you like roller coaster rides? So if you like, that's good, because then when it goes up and down like this, you enjoy. Otherwise, you say, what's happening? But yeah, because it's not possible for a soul to remain soul conscious easily or for a very long time, because you need a lot of energy to do that. So it is said you need energy to get energy. And when you're soul conscious, then you're in the same dimension where Shiv Baba is, so then you can draw energy from him. But if you become body conscious, then you're in the dimension of Ravan, which is materialism, which means that you are very totally impacted by sense perception. And all of this drains your energy. So there are moments where you take energy and a lot of moments where you lose energy. And when you're losing energy, it's very difficult to manage circumstances in comparison with when you're in your power or you're having your energy. So there are two types of energy. One is energy power, and there's another type of energy which, Baba says to us, would you please sit on your seat of self-respect, or which I call self-honor? And when you are soul conscious, you can stay on your seat of self-honor, and then you can respond to circumstances from a state of being self-empowered. You're in your power, you have your virtues and powers and wisdom and everything at your disposal, and then you are not able to be manipulated because you're awake and you know the games, because the confluence age is the age of games, which is specially designed to make you crazy and disempower you. You may have noticed. And so when we are asleep, we miss the signals. And when we are awake, we catch it and we do something about it. And one part of the game that goes on is to get a person to doubt themselves and to doubt their ability to catch the signals and to doubt the signals. And then you can be manipulated by circumstances, people, the system, whatever you want to call it, but it keeps you under. And so we want to be awake and with it. But everything is conspiring to prevent that. And then Baba says, do it anyway. And the thing is, it takes a lot of energy to do that. And the sources of energy that I think we have are, first of all, is the knowledge, because the knowledge is like food. And when you are hungry or starving, it really takes away your energy physically. But if you have the energy of the food of knowledge, it is like a very good boost to keep you in your awakened, aware, enlightened state. So the knowledge and really this churning process of the knowledge is important, because then you know how Baba talks about the churning process, that the basic ingredients is grass. And if you sit and eat grass, that's what starving people do. They eat grass. But that's all there is, if there's any grass. But anyway, if you're a cow, it's good because cows like grass. So a sacred cow means the people who chew on this grass and who take it through all the processes of getting it to be milk and butter and ghee. And so we need to be feeding ourselves on this ghee, because as you heard from the ceremony of Diwali and all the explanations, this ghee is what keeps the flame alight. That means that the base of yoga is the oil of knowledge. And if you light your flame and you don't keep putting more oil in, your flame will go out. And that's the way it goes. So this first power, I think, is this power of knowledge. And then why you have to have a flame being lit, because you need light. You need the power of yoga, because when you are connected with Shiv Baba, you're pulling energy in. So you need the knowledge to light up, and you need to light up to pull the energy. And then you also need another energy, which is pure karma. There's also an energy. So to be awake enough to make sure that you are accumulating yoga, knowledge, and pure karma, it means that you're doing what you need to do. You're doing the best thing you need to do to be able to stay awake and to function, paying attention to these tiny little signals that let you know something important, to prevent getting trapped. Because once you get trapped, you panic and you're toast, someone will eat you. So don't want to get trapped. And how we get trapped is by bait. And, if you want to trap a mouse, you put the cheese inside the cage and he goes in and boom, and he's trapped. Or sometimes it looks like cheese, but really is poison and he dies. So all of these are metaphors for things that happen in life where there is some bait which you go for because you didn't recognize that it's not what it seems to be. So there are people who, when you meet them and they start telling you how wonderful, marvelous, and fantastic they are, right? Have you met people like that? So why is it necessary to do that? Probably because they're not. If you go for it, then that's a trap. Because if somebody is what they are, like transparent, you don't need to say, oh, I am so wonderful, marvelous, and fantastic, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. You know? So it's a signal. You raise a red flag and say, okay, that's interesting. I'll see for myself. And then there's people who say, oh, if you come along with me, I can give you this and this and this and this. And it's called bribery and corruption. So that's also a trap, right? Have you had some people who do that? Oh. Anything that they say, if it's too good to be true, it isn't true. So you know that one. And there's this wonderful story in India that is a wonderful metaphor for this problem. Because even if you know, you get trapped anyway. And the story is of this person who had parrots, and he wanted to go somewhere for some reason. I forgot what it was said in the story, but he was told that, you know, if you go and leave your parrots, the hunter will come and get them. And so you have to do something about your parrots. So he said, okay, well, my parrots are very intelligent because they know how to talk. And so I'll teach them so they'll protect themselves. And I'll tell them, okay, the hunter will come. The hunter will come. You know, he'll spread his net. He'll spread his net. He'll put, you know, some goodies on it. He'll put goodies on it. But we won't fly into the net. We won't fly into the net. Okay, you got the message, you got the lesson. Oh, yes, we got the lesson. And so off he went. The hunter came, spread his net, put the things, and they all went in and got trapped. So this is the problem, that being asleep is knowing better and doing it anyway. That's called being asleep. So that doesn't work. That's not awake. So just knowing the knowledge theoretically doesn't mean you're awake, doesn't mean you're enlightened. It just means parrot. And parrot is okay, but susceptible to getting trapped. So then we have to really come in circumstances of test, many types of circumstances of test, so that we can become experienced in being awake. Because when you get trapped, then you have to get out of the trap. That takes time and energy. In the meantime, you're not accumulating the knowledge, the yoga, and the pure karma because you're in a trap, so you can't function so well. So that's called, sometimes Baba says that's called getting knocked unconscious by Ravan, you know, because you go for some little goodie that makes it seem like this is a good idea. And the key to being free is to know how to stay free. And Daddy Yankee used to say, it's easy to get free, but it's not easy to stay free. It's easy to get rid of someone, but it's not easy to develop yourself in such a way that you can handle whether somebody's there or not there. You know? And so, although we do advertise this as Easy Raj Yoga, don't be fooled by this word Easy Raj Yoga, because it's very, you can say easy when you know how, like everything else, but it requires a lot of skill to be in the Iron Age and in the Confluence Age, because they are coexisting. And so the Iron Age refers to the patterns in your soul. There are patterns or sanskaras, and these patterns are correspond to the Iron Age. You can look at your soul, golden, silver, copper, iron. The gold part has different patterns, and the silver part has again different patterns. The copper part has different patterns, and the iron part has different patterns. And in the Confluence Age, you want to change your patterns from Iron Age patterns to Golden Age patterns. And you've seen a kaleidoscope, right? And you turn it and it keeps changing the patterns. And so you can even consider that your soul is like a kaleidoscope, which is just going in one direction. And when it's finished all the changes of patterns, it has to go back to the beginning again. So the Confluence Age is that what I call evolution, where you're going from this total chaos to this beautiful symmetry of color and form and fragrance and everything that is the sign of the Golden Age sanskaras, which Baba calls Sato Pradhan. And it all begins in the intellect. So the intellect is your capacity for coherent, logical thought. And the Iron Age is all about how to fool people into having incoherent, illogical thought while thinking that it's coherent and logical. That's the Iron Age. And I think this is why all the conspiracy theories are so prevalent at the moment, because people are sure that the kind of information that you get from official sources is suspect. Of course, it's suspect. But then the other kind of information that you get from unofficial sources is also suspect. So to find out what's real is quite difficult. And so you have to go with your own intuition. And you don't have enough information to make good decisions. But if you do actually follow all the things, the Maryadas and everything that Baba talks to us about, it will make you more able to pick up what's right and wrong through your conscience. And if something's not right, you will see that thing and there'll be a vibe about it which says, something wrong with this. Everything will be right except the vibration. And then there are other things, kind of the opposite. It looks like really not okay, but the vibe is right. And so I think one of the descriptions of yoga is that you're able to pick up when things are right through your intuition. And very often when Baba was teaching the first group of BKs, which are what we call the dadis, he would say things like, you will know if you should go this way or that way. He said, for example, someone asked him, what should we do when there's a catastrophic earthquake? And he said, well, your feet will know the way. Just be in connection and you will go where you have to go, or not go anywhere if it's better to stay still. So there's this dimension of knowingness, which can be very beautifully activated if your knowledge, your yoga, and your pure karma is all good, and you're steady and stable, and you know who you are, and you're on your seat of self-respect, and all of these things are all lined up. You will get the signal. Sometimes Baba talks to us about you get the touching. He touches you. Okay, yes, do this now. And it turns out to be exactly the right thing. But it's really easy for someone who's off in la la land to get a whole bunch of touchings, which are totally the wrong thing. So you need to know the difference between being really connected or being often a mental health problem, because those things look the same. And it's sometimes said that it's very difficult to distinguish between a mystic and somebody who's totally insane. But you have to be able to distinguish. And this is why the instrument for this is conscience. See? And so being awake to me is also connected with having a very good quality conscience. And one of the things that happens to people is a rusty conscience, or a conscience that don't talk to you anymore because you didn't listen for so often. It says, okay, I'm not talking to you, this is not worth it. And so it's very important to act according to your conscience, because that is a way of, sharpening it so that it lets you know. And there are many, many times when the forces around you put you in a very awkward situation where you are obligated to go against your conscience. And if you don't go against your conscience, then there will be a very severe price to pay. Have you experienced that? And if you follow your conscience anyway, and you happen to be very, very spiritually wealthy, then you pay the price and you keep a good conscience. And this is actually better, but you have to be courageous to do that. Because you may be afraid of the threats, because there are threats. And if you're not afraid of the threats and you stick with your conscience, then that's very good. There's always a risk. It's very important. A person who's awake has to be willing and prepared to take risk. Is that okay? Because sleeping people, they don't have to take risks. They're asleep, whatever happens when they wake up, they may be dead already or whatever. But the difficulty for many people is this thing which Baba calls the power to face. You have to face yourself. You have to face the truth. You have to face the fact that you got into a trap, because this is the Ramayana. This is Sita, the story of Sita. And there's a problem with Sita. You know the story of Sita? I remind you of it. The story of Sita is that she saw a nice deer who had a nice golden coat, and she wanted that for herself. And this symbolic. It doesn't mean that she wanted to kill a deer and take the coat. That's not really what a deity does. But it's symbolic of like a higher position, symbolic of extra honor. Sometimes in Gyan, Baba talks about name and fame. This is what Sita was interested in. And the metaphor for it is this golden jacket made from a deer. And the deer was Maya. And she knew it was Maya. And Ram knew it was Maya anyway. They all knew. And they did it anyway. And so this is why Baba says he's creating three dharmas here: the Brahmin, the deity, and the Kshatriya. And so if you want to be a Silver Age BK, then you go for name and fame. And if you want to be a Golden Age deity, then you do not fight, but you assert your victory. Or another way of putting it is, you don't try to do something unless it's guaranteed that you will get it. And that means no desires. To do something where the consequence is guaranteed is just to understand the philosophy of karma. If you do pure karma, you cannot avoid the consequences. But you don't do it because of the consequences, you do it because that's your way. You do pure karma because you do pure karma, because that's who you are. And so the consequences of it is not your motive, but you understand that it's there, but you're not much focused on that, you see. And there are times when you have to assert, there are times when you have to stand up for yourself. And so you have to do that, not because you want something, but because that's what it means to stay on your seat of self-respect. You know, so these are quite subtle things. And you could say that the Sita, who does anyway what she knows not to do, is a Silver Age person, because why do you do that? Because you're asleep. Because if you know it's Maya and you know the consequences and you do it anyway, what kind of awake is that? That's asleep, isn't it? And then there's all the story that happens afterwards. And the key difference between the Sita and Arjuna is Arjuna spends his entire time with Krishna on the battlefield arguing for conventional morality, but eventually gets persuaded to drop it. Whereas Sita and Ram, they stick with conventional morality. And that leads to total failure. Is that right? So we know that. But yet it's very insidious, this, this influence of conventional morality. And then the other thing which people find a little tricky is that God plays tricks. It's the word chaturai, turns things around, and I didn't do anything, but he did. And so the people who are based in conventional morality, they'll put a finger on that and say that's not okay. And God will say, "What are you talking about? You don't understand anything." And indeed, they don't, because fixed ideas, fixed. So these are little signs, like politeness. People who are polite always, they're sleeping. Because you get trapped so easily, so easily. Oh no, you have to be polite. Excuse me, not to the wolf. If you're a sheep, you do not do that. So being awake means you have to really assess every situation on its own merits, staying on your seat of self-respect, connected with the spiritual laws that Baba gives us, the Maryadas and all of this. And then you navigate your way according to Srimat, not according to Parmat. Parmat means all this, which is specially designed to keep everybody asleep. And walk into one trap after another, after another, after another. And then what do you become? Hamburger. Somebody else will enjoy eating you up. And why? No reason. You know better. So awake is like that. And we also have a problem of making assumptions. Or you do something in good faith with assumptions, regardless of the signals that you get. Is that right? And so we have to do something in good faith, but not regardless of the signals. When the signals come, it means you have to take responsibility for what you're doing. And that means that your relationship with authority has to be sensible. Because there are many authorities which dictate to you. And in Germany, after the Second World War, there was these trials, Nuremberg trials, about who's responsible for what atrocity and all that. And, it came down to a situation where the military people have to follow orders. But when you follow orders that go against a higher order, then you don't have to follow orders. But then you'll get shot. So what's better? And there were many people in that situation during the wartime who committed suicide rather than follow those orders. Many. I checked it fairly recently. And there was some situation where you get here in the United States, sometimes the president may say, I'm going to shoot somebody with my nuclear bombs, and the generals say, I'm sorry, even if you have full power, but we will say, not a good idea. They do that. I have done that. And so, so you have to be ready to draw these lines which clarify that you're awake, because otherwise you are devolving responsibility, but you have responsibility. So this is moral philosophy. And it is very important in the Confluence Age to work with these situations and things and actually do the right thing. You see, and um, the order that God gave to Arjun in Gita is you have to kill the badness in the person without killing the person. And you can't kill the person anyway, so kill them. And Arjuna said, what? How do I do that? But that was what he had to do, right? And so you need to have this eye sufficiently awake to be able to notice any moment where someone or even yourself is operating on the basis of the evil within, which is not the same thing as the person themselves. That means you're making a distinction between the person and their behavior. And in language, you know, they say if a person steals something, they say this person is a thief. And actually, this approach to things would say, no, this person is a soul and they did this. So what you do is not what you are. That's important. And so, you know, you can say to somebody, okay, I love you, I honor you, I respect you, but I don't accept what you're doing. And consequently, the consequence of what you're doing in our relationship is have a nice day. Because you can't behave like that with me. I'm Shanti. You see what I'm saying? But I don't have anything against you. Just sort out your behavior. Otherwise, see you later. So it's very, very useful to distinguish between a person and their behavior. Because the behavior is your karma. It's what you do. And why do you do what you do? Is because of your internal wounds, which everybody has plenty of. But the way our culture, our moral culture functions is to classify a person as what they did. And that is actually morally reprehensible. But nobody thinks about that, you see, because they're sleeping. So if you're awake, you will make this distinction. Even when you're listening to the Murli, you have to be awake. And very often Baba says, first, sweet children, be soul conscious and then listen. Because if you're not soul conscious and you listen, you will hear something else. So why do we sit down and meditate for some time before anything, talking or anything? Is it to establish the self in soul consciousness and listen to what's coming, knowing this is coming from God. He's talking to me, the soul, and he's not talking to me, the body. He's talking to the soul. And he's talking about the philosophy of karma, He's talking about confluence aged evolution of the soul in the context of karmic accounts, a set of moral principles that are not very moral or very principled, but you have to be clear about. And so all of this is a continuous polishing of the diamond, which is the intellect, you see. And if you're asleep, the polishing won't happen. And if you're coming at it from the angle of body consciousness, you won't hear what he's saying because it won't touch the soul. So it is important to make oneself awake on this level to really actually evolve, because otherwise, like, nothing will happen. And if you are in this practice without that, then you can't really sustain it. You wouldn't get very far. It would become boring. You would say, oh, this is repetitive, and you fall away. But when you really do the work, which is hard work, you see, because your intellect is a muscle. Your conscience is also like a muscle. And if it's not working and you suddenly give it work to do, it'll say, oh, you can't do this. It's too hard. And so daily dealing with this is a very good way to get that muscle going and stay clear and pick up the signals and say, okay, yes, got it. But then the problem with that is you're on your own. So that becomes also a question to ask yourself. Is it okay to be on your own? You're with everybody, no doubt, but if you don't go along with certain things, which you shouldn't go along with, then you're on your own. And it's quite difficult for people to be willing to be on their own. But if you are willing to be on your own, you keep a clear conscience, and it does command people's respect because they get it. They might not get it right away, but they get it, that you will not compromise your soul for any reason. And so then they say, oh, trust this person. So that's awake. I know we've got a lot of time this evening for questions, but there might be some questions now on this subject. You have something?
Question from online.
Okay.
How do we recognize a wolf dressed in a sheep's clothing?
Well, you sit with your mum and she will read you the story of Little Red Riding Hood. And all these stories are ancient stories because they're talking about human nature. And these stories are called fables. And fables are of a specific type of fairy tale or story where the storyteller has understood that the nature of certain animals is also reflected in certain human beings. And it's a way of warning children how to judge, how to be a good judge of character. And this is really the thing. It's all about being a good judge of character. So if there is a wolf dressed in sheep's clothing, you will notice that maybe the ears will stick out, or the claws will stick out, or there'll be something. Maybe the teeth are a bit long, because sanskaras. You know, I was talking about the person who says, I am this and I am that and I am the other, right? And I'm super, super me. Okay. So, okay, then you check. Do they have the sanskaras that corresponds with what they say they are? And if they don't, then this is not what they say. This is something else. And so you have to be, people really don't like it if you judge them, right? They say, don't judge me. At least I get that all the time. Don't judge me. And I said, no, I will judge you. Of course I will judge you. What do you think I am? I will judge you. I will evaluate you. What's wrong with you? Don't judge you. I will. I won't condemn you. I won't judge in the sense of prejudge, but I will judge. This is one of the powers of Raj Yoga, discern and judge. So you have to discern, hey, this sheep, and not looking like a full proper sheep, or maybe looking like a sheep, but certainly not acting like a sheep, you know. So you try out a few behaviors and see, is this really a sheep? And you find that there's something wrong with this sheep, you know, it's just got a very long snout. And then you know that this is someone who is trying to deceive you and who is trying to capture you. And so then you get taken for a ride. And that human relationships are not, everybody is, you can't say, oh, the soul is so beautiful, and then you get eaten up by a wolf and saying, the soul is so beautiful, even if it's got a wolf's face, it's really a beautiful soul. That means you're a stupid idiot, So don't be that. We had a situation, a real life situation, which was a fatal flaw of discernment and judgment. And there was three BKs in a car, and the driver was drunk and driving in the most horrific manner imaginable down a road which had blind corners all the time. It was followed by another car which had two BKs in it, who was seeing this and saying, wow, this is a serious situation. We have to do something about it. And so they stopped for a pee. They all stopped for a pee. And then the people in the car behind said to the people in the car in front, you know what? Your driver is so dangerous that you are going to be in an accident anytime now, because we've been following you for several miles, and this is a serious problem. And they said, no, Baba will do it and everything will be fine. Within 10 minutes, they were dead. So this is an important story, that if there is a sign, don't get into BK Lala land, because that's not a good place. And don't be stupid, because you're responsible to look after yourself. Baba can intervene when it's really beyond your capacity to take care of yourself. But he will only do that in certain circumstances, very occasionally. But if you are not doing what you're supposed to do, he will fold his arms and say, sleeping BK, not awake. But if you do everything and still the situation is really bad, then Baba can come and take care. And we have experienced that. And it's very amazing how much he takes care of you. But there is a saying, God takes care of those who take care of themselves, which means he doesn't take care of those who are not responsible. So, bear that in mind. That's the wolf in sheep's clothing. You should be able to detect.
Someone wants to know a little bit more about sanskar. You talked a bit in the morning, right now.
Sanskars. Actually, I think our whole study from A to Z helps us to understand a little bit more about sanskaras, because it's a gigantic subject. And when we, I think it's a long time ago since I ever taught anybody the 7 days course, but as far as I know, in the 7 days course, you tell people that whatever your karma is, this creates your sanskaras, right? Is that what you learned? Yeah. So that's a small percentage of it. But there's other things that create sanskaras that are not that. One thing about sanskaras is the way you are raised that creates your sanskaras. So that's not necessarily you doing something, but the way you are raised that creates sanskaras. A lot of people are raised in dysfunctional families, so they get highly dysfunctional sanskaras. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles, So to heal from that is a big piece of work. And on the basis of having received dysfunctional sanskaras by how you were raised or how you were educated, by the society you live in, to become free from that and independent of that is the big BK deal. Because if you think you're responsible for how you were raised, that's actually not true. You were raised a certain way. It's like data, it's a given. And it messed you up, traumatized you, bent you out of shape in every imaginable way. And Baba says, okay, let us see if we can straighten you out. And if something is very beautiful and very valuable and all contorted, then you have to straighten it very patiently over a long period of time. And so his method of straightening us out is this teaching. Yoga, Gyan, and pure karma. And slowly, you, very, very slowly, very, very slowly, you will get it. And then you will figure out that the way you're handling yourself is nothing to do with you, but it's to do with something that was put on you from outside. Because if something is to do with you, that's really you. You're responsible. But if something is put on you from outside, it's easier once you've got it, once you've seen it, to drop it, because it's not you. It's some other people. And usually Baba says that you get born into a family where you have karmic accounts. And so there's that angle on it. But you also get born into a family which is specially designed to mess you up good and proper. And that's your laboratory. And you may also arrive in a BK family, which is also specially designed to mess you up even more. And so this is also really very, very good, because you have to be able to figure out how these environments contain messages for you that will help you to become more true to yourself. Because if you don't, you're going to be in hell. And if you get it right, you're going to be free. But you have to discern. You have to understand what's happening. You have to understand the game, because there's God's game and then there's people's game. And God will use people's game to get his game done. He's very tricky. And so therefore, it is just very, very important to have this power of discernment, to really know, this is me. I am a pure, golden aged, etc., soul. And I'm in this very awkward situation, which is not because I deserve it, but something else. It's like, this is my school. And this, I have to learn something which is so subtle and so, unusual and so unexpected, that I have to figure out what's going on here. And it may take me a while to figure it out. And you may have a lot of incidents, all of which add up to something. And then you can see that it's about dropping a sanskara that you picked up in good faith, but it wasn't a good one. And it sometimes has to do with letting yourself be taken advantage of, or sometimes it has to do with not asserting yourself and you need to assert yourself. Or sometimes it has to do with really doubting your value and you need to understand your value. And sometimes it's to do with you're completely under the influence of some authorities which are not right, and you're replicating that on other people, which is very not right, and you need to drop that. So there are all sorts of patterns that we come in with, sanskaras. And sometimes he says, okay, you have original sanskaras. And when there is good yoga and you make contact with yourself, you find yourself, you find out the reality of who you are. And even if the whole world doesn't like that idea or doesn't want you to find out who you are or whatever the thing is, but you find out who you are anyway, and then you become that against all odds. And that this is also a kind of way of freeing yourself of certain patterns that are put on you. And you can get in contact with that through this deep churning and good yoga and pure karma, because this recipe makes you able to pick up other messages, like these touchings or something. And Baba will communicate to you if he really wants you to get the point. He has all kinds of ways to get you to get the point. And he will use things that are in the drama, and he will get you to have a thought. Okay, so think of this situation because it corresponds to Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. Oh, really? So you have a look at the Midsummer Night's Dream. The light goes on, you get it, and you say, oh. Okay. And then you go to the next lesson. But, some lessons take a while to learn. And this all connected with sanskaras. So we've been listening to some questions from online. I don't know if there are more or if there are some from here. There are more. Well, we have about 10 minutes before we have to stop, so we can take another one unless there's one here. You have one? Okay, can we bring the microphone to Deborah? Just here in front of me.
You had said one part that not to fight, but assert your victory, and not because of consequences that might happen, right? Not because of the consequences. But what if a situation has to do with money, and let's just say someone damaged something or your property or something, a good sum of money is owed. Is that something that should be, and they did it, okay to?
Of course, you must assert your right, and you must assert yourself, but you must position yourself in regard to that so well that there's no way that you could lose. Do you see what I'm saying? Because otherwise, what happens if you get all riled up and you fight, you're likely to lose. So that kind of fighting is not a good idea. It's like reactive fighting. But standing up for yourself and getting all your ducks in line and going for it is like playing the shot, which is, different from fighting, if you see what I'm saying. So I think that it's not practical to fight because you get dirtied and bloodied and all that. And someone told me once, an interesting point about it, and that is that if two bulls are fighting, do not be the grass. Because you get trampled on. So sometimes people just get in the crossfire because of thinking that what they are doing is right, but they're getting trampled on. So you have to be careful about that as well.
I was just wondering, because it has to do with money, is that not right to stand up for your rights?
No, you want money or whatever, you stand up for your rights. Absolutely.
Gosh, I wish I had a better question, but I was going to ask you about the language of the eyes and how you can see somebody and they might be a really good actor, and they're trying to deceive you, but being so conscious is what I got.
Well, you'll pick it up because you'll see the shifty eyes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. This is all about picking up subtle signals. Because when we're gross or we're caught up in our own stuff, you don't see what's there. Baba talks to us about this detachment a lot. And in detachment, you distance yourself from the situation. You can see the whole picture. You can pick up the signals. But the important thing is to validate your ability to pick up the signals, because so many people, they say, oh, I knew it, but I didn't do anything about it because of doubt of the self. And so we have to get across that self-doubt, because you see, part of the messages of what I call the toxic conventional morality is, we were talking about it earlier today, I was telling everybody the problem lies in the manusmriti, you see. And what does the manusmriti say? It says the word purush refers to a man, and the opposite of a man is prakriti, and then that means prakriti is matter. That means men have souls and women don't. Excuse me, what kind of logic is that? There's a whole moral principle, a whole moral law, all built up on this incorrect processing of concepts. Because Purush means the spirit, and Prakriti means the body. So whether you're a man or a woman, you're a combination of soul and body, doesn't matter. what your bodily gender is, you see. So you can't build up a whole set of laws and principles based on a lack of basic understanding of the meaning of a word. And so many things are taken in that way, and they become like the prevailing social attitudes. And this is what makes people doubt the validity of their perception. Because when you're in contradiction, when your conscience says one thing and the prevailing social attitudes say another thing, you have very little support for your conscience and plenty of support from the prevailing social attitudes that force you to do something against your conscience to the convenience of the moral authorities who do not have your best interests in mind, but who pretend that they do. And so you have to get it. But the problem is, if you get it, you're on your own. And this is why it takes courage. I mean, what happens to whistleblowers? Shoot first and ask questions later, if you're still alive. So this is why you need to be able to catch the signs very early on, to stay out of getting trapped and keep yourself free, and notice who you can really trust and who you cannot trust. And that's just the way it is. And here we go back to the wolf in sheep's clothing. People who say, trust me, don't. Yes. Can you give the microphone? And this will need to be our last question.
It's just a follow up on what you said. Actually, sometimes we
hold the mic close so we can hear you.
Sometimes we get the signals, but we keep giving benefit of doubt because
that's exactly what I was talking about, because of prevailing social attitudes.
Yeah.
And so this is the problem. If you put yourself on the other side of the fence from the prevailing social attitudes, they will give you a hard time. And that's the price you pay, you know. It's very expensive to be a real person. And this is why Baba says your yoga gives you income. Because if it's expensive, it's okay. I got money, I can pay. So, but you have to be in your power, and you may not start off in your power. And so you need to grow gently, slowly, naturally, and reach that point, because it doesn't make any sense to just put some red circles on your heart and say, okay, shoot now, I'm ready. No, that's not what we do. That's called being an idealist. And so we have to be realist and also real. And that takes time to reach that stage. You can't do that in 5 minutes. Go from Tamo Pradhan to Sato Pradhan and Jivan Mukti in 1 second. Very nice, but it takes a lot of seconds to get to that 1 second, you know. And yeah. So awake. I'm sure there's more, and we'll have a little something this evening, some chit chat, and then in the afternoon we'll talk about stable. Because once you're awake, then you have to be stable, because you're on a tightrope. Om Shanti.